This is the Harboring Light. I'm Mary. I simply give a conservative perspective about the world around me. As I do in the beginning of each episode of my podcast, I mention my social media and my audio platforms. Social media, I will link that in this episode. And to add on to that, with social media, I'm on Substack. So, you enjoy my writing content on Substack? Please feel free to follow me. And please feel free to subscribe and support. And also to add on to that with Substack, I'm going to start writing a format where, you have questions, comments, concerns on different topics you want me to cover, as far as writing content. And then I'll also add that in as a variation to my podcast. Things you want me to cover on my podcast, I will add all my social media links and my email address and my Substack content. So let's move on to audio platforms. I'm on Pandora. I'm on Spotify for podcasters. I'm on Overcast. I'm on iHeartRadio. And I'm on Audible, Amazon Music, and I'm looking to grow to where you enjoy your audio content on that. So, this episode is about Tales from the Crypt. My husband and I are going to make commentary about that, and then we're going to talk about the ins and outs of the comic book, the movies, everything else that is entailed with Tales from the Crypt. So, let's talk about it and let's get into it. All right, so Tales from the Crypt. So, from doing research and everything, I'm gonna start talking about the comic books, and I want to know what you think about what I'm saying. First off, so it was the Tales from the Crypt. It was coming out right after World War II. And from my understanding through the research is that, and then, with the gore that goes on with these comics, and from what I've seen and, understand and personally seen of the comic book, but, this gives more depth to it. So the whole reason behind it apparently is men coming back home from the war. They wanted to see more sex and violence and things. It from what I gather is a way of sort of dealing with things, coping with things, kind of. But it was sort of wanting to see something different.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't. A lot of these guys started. A lot of guys that served actually wrote comic books. Ended up writing them and stuff. Most of the guys coming back were, getting into motorcycles and hot rods and things like that. They were taking their old 30s Fords and using the skills they learned in the military to soup up their flathead Ford or to soup up their Harley, making a chopper. They were trying to get a life for the free. In actuality, it was a lot of kids getting into comic books like Tales from the Crypt through the 40s and 50s. And then, they had the Haunt of Fear and the Vault of Horror. And parents and clergy and stuff, because these comics were, pretty graphic. Not by today's standards, but
yeah, it was
by the standards of the
that
40s
time.
and
It was
50s,
outlandish,
right, graphic and inappropriate. And clergy and parents and stuff really had an issue. And it's these types of comics are what led to, they thought it was causing illiteracy in kids and a lot of different things like that. But it was this stuff that actually led to um, Congress creating the comics code.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You know, but there was a want for this stuff because kids wanted, young adults and stuff wanted something more, wanted something that was beyond. I mean, this is getting into the technology is in a big swing at this point. Through the 40s and 50s.
Right.
We're
With the first
it
computer and
well, and it's getting post-war
right.
era, so there's a lot of money in the economy. There's a lot of people coming back with stories that they can't really tell. There's a lot of kids who have fathers who came back different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's one of the things I'm most thankful for is that I served in war. I served in the military and had an experience with war before I had children, and I had children long enough after to where kind of learn to cope, learn to deal with the things, the experiences and stuff. But, there's a lot of guys that may not have had that opportunity. They
Mm-hmm.
had their children well before. And, back at that time, yeah, a guy 20 years old was, 18, 20 years old, 21 years old. He was already, he's been courting his high school sweetheart,
Mm-hmm.
planning to get married, if not getting married. So if a kid was 22, 23 years old, getting drafted and going to war, even 18, 19, getting drafted, going to war, coming home, having a child, he might not have had time to deal with the things, and there wasn't as many resources, as it was now. So, that's where you get the stories of Uncle Johnny's just got shell shocked. Don't talk to Uncle Johnny about these
Yeah.
things, just be wary around with this stuff, or
Mm-hmm.
and dealing with your dad. So you have these kids who want to know, who are reaching out, and not only that, times are changing. There's the depression, and
Right.
there was prohibition before,
Mm-hmm.
just before that, and around that time as well. So you had the prohibition, depression, great wars,
Yeah, and the
happening
mm-hmm.
over a couple of decades. So these kids growing up in that, they want a distraction, and for a lot of them, horror. I mean, there was no real horror movies.
No.
You had Dracula and the Mummy and
Right.
Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah.
You you had the classic horror movies, but they were quite campy.
Right.
A lot of them.
B stuff, which is not
I mean,
what
for
it
the
was
era,
for the era, but
now it would be considered B. Yeah,
well, it's the wave of B stuff that
you're right. Yeah,
the first wave of it.
it's what a lot
That's
of
what I
B
mean.
stuff kind of replicates. But
Yes.
at the
Yeah.
time, Bram Stoker's Dracula being turned into a movie, and there was it was for the time very, very adult, you could say, very scary. And you have these young kids who are able to get these comic books because they were like a penny, a
Mm-hmm.
nickel. Save up a nickel, do some, sell some cans, to buy a comic book, and to buy the new comic book that had these stories that shows someone's face melting or a talking skeleton, and
Mm-hmm.
it made parents and you know other people think, oh well, this is just rotting their brains, but they had lead paint and everything, and it's
Mm-hmm.
just one of those things that it almost seemed more like a scapegoat of
Yeah.
these are causing problems.
And instead of actually taking the time to, it's one of those things that doing something fast and loose in order to feel better and thinking you're solving the problem, but not actually solving it, and taking the time to understand what the issues are, because it's either, this is just my opinion, um, of course. Well, not, I'm just putting it out that this is my opinion. You know, uh, it's either you don't want to accept the reality, or the reality within not accepting the reality is something that doesn't go with what you want to believe. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
if you say, for instance, with the comic books, oh, this is corrupting the youth.
Yeah.
And then you delve down deep and you find out that comic books inspired um, young people to think about things in other ways, to be more creative, or to be writers or something like that. That
Mm-hmm.
goes against what you perceive to be these negative things are about.
Yeah. Well, I
Comic,
mean,
you know.
it's that, and at the time, I mean, religious organizations, and not to bring down on them, but there was a lot of religious polarity and religious pressure.
Hmm.
I mean, John Kellogg created cornflakes, or started the cereal cornflakes and stuff with no flavor, as an ideal food for mental patients. And
Right. Yeah.
he was very, very much a part of trying to convince people to have their young boys circumcised
Hmm.
to prevent them from masturbating in their teens, circumcise them as babies and they're less likely to masturbate as teens, which, okay, sure, I don't know how he came to that conclusion, but he did. And you had some of the biggest people pushing for prohibition, especially with these guys coming back from war and stuff, were, you know, Christian organizations. A lot of women were pushing for this stuff, and what's funny is this is before women could even vote, but there was a lot of, teetotalers that, and women Christian groups that were pushing hard, and even without the ability to vote, somehow were able to push Congress into a way of, hey, we should put a ban on alcohol. Well, same thing, mothers and clergy, and we're seeing these comic books and seeing these things that their kids had interest in, and it wasn't just Tales from the Crypt. I mean, Tales from the Crypt was a big one. You can, you know, it's almost like what's going on with some of the books in school today. Not for the same reason, because I'm not going to justify a lot of the books that people are having issue with. There's a lot of differences between the two. Um, just having some slightly graphic images, I guess, for the time. Even then, not that much, like not that graphic. And considering that it wasn't just like Tales from the Crypt, it was Batman comics, Superman comics, a lot of different, uh, action comics had an issue. Detective comics had things where they ended up bending the knee to get the comic book codes seal, uh, so that they could be sold in comic book stores, and parents would be okay with it because, oh, look, it's got the comic code seal of
Hmm.
approval. But you had all this outreach and stuff because mothers and clergy were worried about their children, supposedly worried about this stuff, and they were, pushing out. But at the same time, there was a big push against communism. There started to be this big push against we've got to stop communism. We got to stop this. And then that led us into our fight against communism. That's when we start having issues with Korea. It wasn't long after we started having issues with Korea. We go into Korea, then Vietnam, then the Cold War with Russia and stuff, and this big fight against communism.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the next big thing. And it's just fun. One of those things is, the comics code and all these things that it's supposed to be for the protection of youth against this stuff. But it's a giant slap in the face to what our Constitution, our founding document, that says freedom of speech,
Mm-hmm.
freedom of religion,
Mm-hmm.
you know, freedom of press. These freedoms that we're supposed to have, they're actively pushing against. It's one thing if you want to just say it, but making rules and regulations and laws saying, hey, this is stuff that has to be done, to me just seems kind of outrageous. I'm glad that, they in the HBO series and the stuff that they did on Fox when they did the Tales from the Crypt movies and stuff later on, I'm really glad that they kind of do a call out to it. They kind of do
Yeah.
a look at what was going on, look at this. Even in the Tales from the Crypt comics, they end up
Mm-hmm.
having like a bad politician who's, going out and trying to cause things to happen that he shouldn't and gets his just desserts. But
Mm-hmm.
that, it's just one of those things that it's kind of hard to believe that there was so much pushback against something that, in all honesty, isn't really much worse than what kids were seeing anywhere else.
Right.
Even for the time, there were things. I mean, most comics don't have stories that are anything worse than what you could read in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And but they completely ignored it because none of the people who were against it were actually reading any of it or seeing any of it. They were worried about the images.
Right.
Look at these pictures. Look at this image of this guy flying through the air, letting bullets bounce off of him. What's this teaching our kids?
Right. Which is, and it's one of those things that I see. Where do you draw the line in the sand? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because on the other side of this, the stuff that you see going on today.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you get from saying, "Oh, these images or this that they're just corrupting our youth," because and without just overgeneralizing without understanding, to, "Oh, you must accept that these things are that we're showing pornographic things that you find squeamish for me to talk about to you, and these public meetings and town square meetings that parents talk about with what's being shown in their children's schools and public libraries. Oh no, you must be accepting of these images. This isn't harmful. This is proactive.
Right.
This is tolerance. This is
Educational to the to,
educational.
but the thing is, it's like a drastic minority, a minority of a minority falls into this, but they're trying to push it even more. They're trying to actually normalize something that's really not, because it's a fad. When we were in middle school, the whole idea, every girl I knew said they were bi. I'm
Mm-hmm.
bi. I'm bi. That was like the thing to do, is to say you were bi and it's
Right.
supposed to be attractive and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm bi. I'm bi. Well, now it seems like saying I'm transgender is the exact same thing. I'm transgender. I'm transgender. It's like, are you, or are you just trying to get attention?
Yeah.
I'm gender fluid. My pronouns are. Are you, or are you trying to just get an attention? And you're making these decisions, and you're trying to say kids should be able to make these decisions that will drastically alter their lives, but at the same time, no, I don't think these children should be able to choose whether or not they get a tattoo or can drink or smoke or make any other life changing or permanent decision to their life except for this
Mm-hmm.
one decision. But I think it's a lot of this stuff that actually led the way. The actions of today get misused tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
The concerns of
Mm-hmm.
today can easily be misguided and misused tomorrow. And
Mm-hmm.
what you do to try to protect your children and stuff today may cause a lot of issues tomorrow. And I think that's a big thing. If parents had an issue with their kids reading Tales from the Crypt, they shouldn't have let their children buy
In the
the comics.
first place,
They
yeah.
should have been a little bit more active.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a time when they were saying like parents were super active in their lives. I mean, there were two parents in every house. I just think it was, and nobody wanted to tell their kids no.
Mm.
Even then, I mean, today still nobody wants to tell their kids no. But I think then, it it was a struggle to try and control what your kids are doing. But I think, instead of reaching out to Big Daddy government to say, hey, help us keep our children from seeing this stuff, it should have just been, hey, we need to do something in the community to try to keep our kids from seeing this. We need to talk to our children. We need to let them know we're not okay with this. But this is also getting into the time of you push, we push back. The big era of counterculture.
Right. Right.
I mean, counterculture, the counterculture of rebelling
Mm-hmm.
was really starting to come into play. And that's another thing that's really funny because the people who would have been the biggest rebels and, a lot of the people through that time, the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, early to mid 90s, who were the I'm against the flow, against corporatism, against. It's like they're still trying to say they're counterculture. It's like, but you're going along with everything that the big tech companies and the Coca-Cola and Walmart and these big corporations are saying, "Oh yes, this is." It's like, no, that's not counterculture. I mean, the creator of Tales from the Crypt, when the comic codes came out, he said, "You know what? I'm done. I'm not going to do it." And what's funny is, in the '90s, they ended up making a kids show, Tales from the
Right.
Crypt, of the
Right.
same stuff.
Right.
And that's because these parents who were reading
Mm-hmm.
Tales from the Crypt when they
Mm-hmm.
were kids now are growing up and they
Mm-hmm.
have children, and it's like, oh hey, I used to read these comic books when I was a kid,
Mm-hmm.
and they were okay, and it was pretty successful. But I think a lot of them were like, no, my parents wouldn't let me read this stuff, so I'm not gonna let. So there, even in the '90s, it had a lot of mixed mixed like approval for it, but it was still kind of hilarious that you know the counterculture was, yeah, no, we need this, we need
Yeah.
this type of show to prevail, and it
Mm-hmm.
ended up failing. And they did the HBO horror anthology and a few of the HBO movies,
Mm-hmm.
um, Tales from the Crypt, and then the spin-offs, Tales from the Hood, and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know if they're actually spin-offs or just clones.
I would say maybe. I don't know. It's that's kind. I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. You know.
They run in the same vein, but I don't think they're actually from the same companies. I just think they were like, oh, hey, let's do this similar type setup. But that was kind of also around the time that those movies, the Tales from the Hood movies came out. That was kind of like the second coming of black exploitation.
Mm. Yeah.
You had a lot of it in the '70s.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of it did started to kind of die out in the '80s, and then Spike Lee tried to do black exploitation in the '90s, but he had better luck making just his own movies instead of trying to do the copy
Mm-hmm.
of you know well, we're gonna completely infringe on this and steal the entire story. Nobody's gonna say nothing because you know, we'll just say they're racist if they do
Right.
type stuff, which is bullshit for the time. It's bullshit now.
Yeah.
But, you know, in that time, it was hip hop culture was growing, and that was the big boogeyman. It's funny, there's always like some big boogeyman
Mm.
of just about every generation, and today's big boogeyman, Andrew Tate.
Mm.
Today's big boogeyman is telling boys it's okay to be boys and men to be stoic and to look after themselves and to not give themselves so easily to a woman who's not going to care about them. That's the big boogeyman of today. We've got to make sure our kids aren't hearing this.
Mm.
So it went from alcohol to comic books, Tales from the Crypt, to hip hop, to it's okay to be a guy.
And with Andrew Tate, it's on me you it's kind of it's just one of those things. I don't know. It's it's kind of like when you done things
Mm-hmm.
and that you're not proud of, and it comes back to surface and it's not presented in a way,
Yeah.
you know. And then at the same time, I just don't know. I mean, I think it's great that he is trying to do something, but at the same time, I don't know what to say, because it's like all these things that that is being said, and it's like, is that true or not true?
Right.
And I just want to know the truth before, it's kind of like,
Making
okay,
a
this
decision.
seems like this could be logical that he could have done this, but is this true? And you don't really know, and it's like,
Right. Well, and a lot of it has turned out to be lies. But the thing is, he kind of set himself up for a lot of it. It's like, dude, you're going to do these things, this adult content stuff, or have women do this adult content stuff.
right.
When you preach all these other things,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, you can't play both sides. And when you play
Right.
both
No, just
sides,
choose,
bad things are going to happen. So
Yes.
if
Yeah.
you're gonna stand up and say he's very bombastic with the things he says and how he says it and stuff. But if you're gonna stand up and be such a broad force to this, you've got to have every I dotted, every T crossed. You've got to be straight and narrow on the straight and narrow. You got to be
Mm-hmm.
the straight and narrow of the straight and narrow, so much so that people who are straight and narrow look like they're curved.
Mm.
Because everyone's going to be looking for a reason to call you out. And for a guy talking about, oh, it's the Matrix, it's the Matrix, it's the Matrix, you give him a lot of ammo.
Mm.
You know, like I said, some of the things he says are things that need to be listened to,
Mm-hmm.
things that need to be heeded. It's a message that a lot of guys need to hear. Don't devote yourself to a woman who doesn't devote herself to you.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, don't go all in, just because you're lonely. Don't be too emotional.
True.
Don't, take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Work on yourself before you start working on someone else. Be stoic. Don't be too emotional. These things are very important for men.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that we had that we lost. And now it's a struggle trying to get it back, because all the people who go about saying these things, trying to push these things, are getting told to shut up, or they're trying to force them to shut up. They don't want people listening to Jordan Peterson. They don't want people listening to Andrew Tate. They don't want guys listening to this stuff. But on the other hand, there's no females out there giving a message a similar message to women.
No. Yeah.
Feminism has gone and said, yes, queen, do what you want. Be sexually liberated. Have sex with 50, 300, 400 men if you want to. Body count don't matter. Well, what's yours? Oh, I'm not telling you that because obviously it matters
It's
to you.
shameful. So if it didn't matter, you would say it,
Right.
Freely.
And you have all this going on, and where's the women stepping up saying, ladies, you know, you have to be ladies. You want to be treated like a lady? Act like a lady.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you give yourself away easily, you're cheap.
Mm-hmm.
You can't expect something of value. You can't expect new car prices for a used car.
True.
You know, you have to treat yourself and project the value of yourself that you want.
Mm-hmm.
If you go around giving it out for free, giving free samples to every guy who comes along, selling yourself for $4.99 online, guess what? No guy's going to invest his time, energy, and money into you.
True. That's very true. Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's what these guys, these red pill guys, quote unquote red pill guys, are being strung out for. It's like, no, they're saying, right, don't, as a guy, you shouldn't be investing your time and money in a girl that you can get for $4.99. If other guys can buy your girl for $4.99 online, whether it's just photos or video or not, you don't want that. I'm not about to invest my time and energy and money into somebody who is giving out free samples, who's giving out, videos and photos, and especially like a lot of these girls on Instagram and stuff who go around posting all these photos and videos of them doing the stupid TikTok challenges and all this stuff. And it's like, anybody can go and see that for free. So who are you advertising to? Because guess what? The guy you want isn't going to see that and say, that's the girl for me.
Right.
He'll say, oh, I bet you I can have her.
Mm-hmm.
And he'll get you. Then he'll leave you. And then it's on to the next guy. And then when you're sad, broken, lonely, and you might have $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
But ask any millionaire man the one thing he regrets not having, and it's usually children. It's usually a family.
Mm-hmm.
That's why
Mm-hmm.
there's tons of artwork, tons of music, tons of poems and stuff about men who pushed everything aside to go and to make money or
Mm-hmm.
to survive, to have more. And the one thing they regret in life is not being with their children.
Mm-hmm.
There's a proverb of the rich man who goes to a village and sees a man fishing, and he says, "Hey, I can teach you and help you to where you can be a millionaire like me off of these fish.
Right.
You know where all these things are. I can show you how to be a millionaire. I can show you how to make millions of dollars, and you'll never have to worry about anything again in life." And the man says, "When will I get to see my family?" And he's like, "Well, you won't. You'll be, making all this money. You'll be busy with all these things." He says, I think I'm fine with just catching enough fish to go feed my family."
Yeah. That's really.
Because the rich man's saying you'll be able to spend time with your family when you retire.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to miss all this time with your family to go and make all this money that they might be able to have later, but they're not working for,
Mm-hmm.
when you could get enough and have enough for you and your family
Mm-hmm.
to be happy,
Mm-hmm.
and still get to spend time with your family and be there for your family, with your family,
Mm-hmm.
and that's important.
Yeah, very much so. And I it's really Tales from the Crypt. That's what was really good about the premise of it. And I'm fixing to talk about the 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 first movie back in the 70s, and that is relatable to what you just said about family, and then everything tied into that. So, what Tales from the Crypt is always about, sort of speak this karma kind of effect.
Mm-hmm.
What you put out there will come back to you.
Right.
And so it was seen, you know, stories through stories in the comic book. And when we get to the first movie in the 70s, you see, well, spoiler alert, but I won't go into heavy details about it. But it's just these people are sitting around wondering what's going on. And so one by one, they're told um, their fate. And it's very clever in a way that what they put out there comes
Mm-hmm.
back to them in an unexpected way. So, for instance, there's a story that goes along with what you just said. So, it's a mother. She's affluent, and she doesn't have to work. She doesn't have to do anything. She's home with her child, and it's Christmas time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so she just has this disdain thing about, oh, I have all the influence, and anything else is beneath me, or I don't care about it. It doesn't matter to me what's going on
Right.
outside. All that matters to me is what is inside, within my circle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So her daughter breaks that window per se in the um big pristine world that she lives in, by
Right.
bringing in this deranged character into the
Mm-hmm.
home, and eventually destroying
Right.
her fate.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, and then at the same time, the husband, he's not really seen in this depiction of what's going on, because he's out there just making all these sacrifices, burning, doing everything he can to for his family. And it's just this whole misunderstanding of everything that's has to be sacrificed and has to be done in order for her to have her, arrogance. And it's like, what's going on here?
Right.
What do you?
I mean, yeah, that's one of the big things. Like all of the stories from the comic books and stuff was mainly people getting
They're just
just
desserts,
desserts,
right?
right?
Mm-hmm.
Or people learning a lesson. If
Right.
if they didn't get their just desserts, it's someone learning a lesson, and you know, it relates to a lot of things today.
Mm-hmm.
You push too hard in one direction, and either you're going to learn a lesson
Right.
of mind your business,
Right.
or you know you're going to get yours
Mm-hmm.
because the other shoe drops. The wheel at one point in time, every part of the wheel is in the mud. You
Right.
know,
Right. Right.
so everyone always gets theirs at some point, and that was one of the things. And it was a good lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. It was a very good lesson and something that you know reading about could have been very beneficial to a lot of people. And honestly, accountability was like one of the key points to all of the Tales from the Crypt Keeper and stuff. If you
Mm-hmm.
surround yourself with porcelain,
Mm-hmm.
it's not gonna last. You gotta tiptoe around, and you gotta always be on guard to make sure you don't ever slip up,
Mm-hmm.
because everything around you will shatter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like they say, a person in a glass house shouldn't throw stones.
Right. Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. And I think the appeal of the resurgence of Tales from the Crypt is especially the head figure of Tales from the Crypt, the
The
Crypt
Crypt Keeper.
Keeper. Um, so it's said that in the comic books, which and in which I've seen too, that the original comic books,
Mm-hmm.
he's just this um sadistic
Mm-hmm.
presence, but they did it and they re yeah, I guess made it more of make it more appealing, because that's not appealing to. I mean, I just imagine just seeing a show where um this main character, he just gets off on doing these really sadistic things, and then that's supposed to be entertainment.
Right.
But if you make it to where it's clever, and he's comical, and
Mm-hmm.
then has puns in it, it's kind of like, okay, well, that's what is that, what's going on, you bring attention to it. And
Right.
I think doing that helped to get people to notice the on and the honesty of what we're talking about. If you're not careful, you will get what's coming back to you. And it's just it's in the movies and in the television series, even more so in the television series, it's just the way that it's presented visually. You really see that start to see that effect, to where, okay, you start to think about, yeah, that is true. So
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's one of the big things that you see in the TV show, the HBO
mm,
TV show, and even the cartoon that didn't have all the
no,
violence,
right.
and other stuff.
Mm,
It's the idea of the bad person getting what's coming to them,
mm-hmm,
one way or another, and or if there's not necessarily a bad person,
mm-hmm,
the antagonist of it, whether they're bad or not, getting what's coming to them.
mm-hmm,
And that's, you know, kind of important. That's kind of a lesson learned in life. Like, whether you think you're doing something for a just and noble cause, you know, if the way you go about it hurts others or puts others out, you know, you might have some comeuppance.
mm-hmm,
You might be trying to save the world, feed the poor, and all of these things. But if you're doing it at the expense of others, you're probably going to get your comeuppance.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And I think if more of that was taught and told and made apparent, people would have a lot less issues today.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
I mean, because
Mhm.
if I remember correctly, that was one of the stories from Tales of the Crypt.
Yeah.
I can't remember if it was one of the original comics or one of the ones that they converted into a movie, but there was a woman who thought she was so beautiful. She was, you know, pageant winner and all
Mhm.
this stuff. She thought she was the most beautiful thing in the world and was just horrible to all those around her
Mhm.
because no one was as beautiful as her.
Mhm.
And then an accident happens. She's no longer beautiful. She has to hide herself away. She doesn't die. She doesn't, but she loses her looks
Mhm.
and now has to spend the rest of her life without it. And it's, but I was so beautiful. I was so, so yeah. And now you're without it.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
now you have to rely on those people who you treated like garbage
Mhm.
to help you out when guess what? Nobody wants to be around you. And I think that's kind of a lesson for, a lot of these people that, go about trying to demand of others. It's like you might have people on your side now, but it's not long before those people will turn against you.
Mhm. Yeah, that's definitely true.
You know,
Mhm.
before you get yours.
Mhm.
Because eventually you will get yours.
Mhm. Mhm. And I think that it's a really good example of us, us growing up in the 90s, being in the wave of all this, that it's good to be consciously aware of things, consciously aware of your surroundings.
Mm-hmm.
And um it it did, but all these serious subjects being presented in a way that's digestible,
Right.
and then the cleverness of doing that to a mass appeal, is something to say a lot about the things that were going on when we were children.
Yeah.
All right, well, I appreciate your input. Thank you so much. So this reaches the end of the Harboring Light. All right, so tune in and turn up and take care. Bye bye now.